Hi, my name is Michael Lewin. I'm running for Borough President, and the purpose of this video is to explain in a very brief, oversimplified way why New York City is so expensive and what can be done about it. And so in particular, I'd like to go to the screen share function, if this computer will let me. So it seems to me that our city's core problem is that New York simply allows less housing than other growing cities. So one key statistic that I got from the Census Bureau is the percent of the city's housing that was built after 2010. In other words, how rapidly are we allowing the housing supply to grow? So notice that in New York, only 5.5% of the city's housing and change was built after 2010. By contrast, let's look at some other growing cities. Atlanta, a little over 12%, Denver, a little over 12%, Charlotte, a little over 13%, Austin, 18% of the city's housing. 18% of the city's housing was built after 2010. So by an odd coincidence, notice that New York's rents are much higher and that Austin zoning is lower even than Atlanta or Denver and almost as low as Charlotte. In other words, there's a pretty clear pattern. The more housing you build, the lower rents are. So why does New York build so little housing? Well, in a word, zoning. So if you've been to law school or you've read about zoning, you probably have this vague idea that zoning is a good thing because it prevents factories from springing up in residential neighborhoods. And certainly that's the least controversial part of zoning, but it's really not the most common in terms of what generates political controversy. What zoning also does is limit the amount of apartments or houses that can be built on a parcel of land. And so in other words, one of the main functions of zoning is to limit housing for human beings. The idea is housing is bad, better for people to live on the street or live anywhere else than wherever the zoning code governs. And zoning in some ways is more restrictive in New York City than in other cities. How so? Well, in a typical city, a rezoning application might go to a planning board and then straight to the city council. And a rezoning, by the way, is an application to change the zoning code so that usually more housing can be built. However, New York City has imposed additional obstacles to rezoning. In particular, the borough president is one obstacle. The borough president has the right to delay zoning applications to study them for a while. Community boards also have the right to delay zoning applications to study them for a while. These applications or these procedures create additional delay. And since time is money, as the saying goes, that means that developers have to spend more money on their mortgages while they're waiting for the land use applications to go through, which in turn means housing is going to be more expensive than it would be otherwise because the developer has to pass those costs on to a landlord who passes them on to you. To make matters worse, the city bureaucracy actually can propose downzoning on its own. That means downzoning basically means allowing even less housing than is already allowed. So for example, under Bloomberg, 40,000 parcels were downzoned, mostly to homeowner dominated wide areas. I suspect places that tended to be Republican areas. And so of course that constricted housing supply still further. So in other words, the whole system is designed to ensure that housing is not built. So what do we do about it? So of course, there's some candidates who want to make zoning even more restrictive, and that's a video in itself. But my view is we should have less zoning. Now, as a borough president, I wouldn't have legislative powers. I can't change the zoning code. What I can do is when a rezoning application comes in front of my desk, I won't object to an application that includes more housing for more human beings. And similarly, I'll appoint community board members who realize that the city needs new housing that contain rents, rather than community board members who think their job is to protect the city against new housing. In short, my view, put simply, is less zoning, more housing. Thank you.